Hi everyone, been a while, but we are joined for another journey by a professor who is the president of the greatest interior landscaping company in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's known as the Office Plans by Everything Grows. In addition, he has served as a adjunct college professor for several universities where he helped inspire thousands of students to develop and apply key concepts of marketing, especially to their area of interest. He has also been a TEDx speaker, which I love TED Talks and TEDx speakers because their knowledge is immense. And he's best-selling author on Reducing Stress, which we're going to talk about in our podcast today. And lastly, not least, and that's their words, not mine, he is a certified laughter yoga leader and improv comedy cast member, supporting his community to laugh more and stress less. So we introduced, I could be formal, is Professor Pete Alexander to the journey.
Well, David, thank you so much for having me on your show, and I really appreciate your listeners' time as well.
You're welcome. So I gave you the brief how the summary of the journey works, but we want to start at the beginning. Now,
Mhm.
the long-standing joke with my guests are the first earliest memory you remember you was born, which does get a laugh because obviously you are born. But
Mhm.
what was the earliest memories that kick-started your journey, apart from being born, obviously? What was your aspirations when you was younger to being a teenager?
That's a good question. Well, I look back on one of my first positive memories. My great uncle, we were in a cabin. My family was having like a Christmas vacation over in this cabin, and my great uncle and I were sharing part of the cabin, and I remember the bed that I had didn't have a pillow, and so there was only one pillow in the entire section of the cabin, and he gave it to me, and he says, "No, you need to have it more than I do." And I thought to myself, that's kindness. He could have kept that pillow,
Mm.
and so I thought, it's very much for me, I want to stay on the positive side. And it did serve me well growing up in an extremely dysfunctional family. That unfortunately, soon after that memory, the major chaos started. And my parents, they divorced for the second time. They did uh, Liz Taylor, Richard Burton, married and divorced twice. And the crazy thing is about that is their first marriage produced my sister, and the second marriage produced myself. So my sister and I are 100% blood relatives, but from two different marriages. So hard to find. Other people could say, "Yeah, I could relate with that." Um, and when as I was growing up in this extremely dysfunctional family, I didn't learn how to deal with my stress the ways that were effective. I let it get to me. Often I would just kind of let it just sit and stew inside of me. And when I became an adult, I continued that pattern. And it wasn't until I got to my mid 40s and I had a perfect storm of stressful activities that were going on. My dad was dying and he needed his affairs taken care of. My mom had major surgery and didn't have the insurance for the physical therapy that she was going to have after that. I was running my business with several employees that needed my attention. My kids were young at that time and wanted dad's attention. And my marriage was heading for a divorce. So, needless to say, lots of things on my shoulders. And what happened was about 30 days before I was diagnosed, I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And at first, I thought this is fantastic. Being in my mid 40s, I hadn't lost weight since I was in my early 20s. And the weight just kept on coming off, even though I wasn't doing any dieting. I was doing my normal exercise, nothing special. And the weight just kept on coming off. And after I had some blood work done, once the 30th pound came off, doctor came back and said, "Congratulations, you have diabetes, and it's likely been induced by the stress because there's no diabetes that runs in my family. I have a distant cousin is the only person who has diabetes in my entire family." But the crazy thing is, so there I am in my mid 40s. Instead of taking care of my health, I continued to burn the candle at both ends for another 10 years until I ended up in the emergency room, 1 hour from being comatose, and an extended stay in the intensive care unit with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for the listeners who may not know what that is, basically, my body was eating itself alive because of my stress. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. And here's the part that is unbelievable about that. So at this time, I had gone back into corporate. I was managing my interior landscaping business remotely, and I had gone back to corporate because a former boss had asked me to come back to work for a company he had joined, and then he had left, and I got a micromanager as a replacement boss. And now I'm in my 50s and I have a micromanager. And a micromanager basically is a micromanager because they don't trust the people that work for them. And so, it was crazy. And at about 6 a.m. on the second day that I was in ICU, I get this text from this micromanager and it says, "You have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it?" And you know, crazy. I pick up my phone, yeah, I got the text, and I start doing everything I can, pushing the envelope of this phone to try and reschedule this webinar. And the nurse who was caring for me at that point, she comes over to me and they were checking my blood every half an hour. And when I was first admitted to the hospital, my blood sugars were so high that the medical grade glucometers could not read them. They only knew that it was high. And so the lab had to manually estimate my blood sugars, and they estimated it to be 8 to 10 times higher than normal. Well, my numbers had come down into more reasonable levels. They were still higher than they should be, but they were more reasonable. And as I was sitting there trying to reschedule this webinar, she checks my blood, and my numbers, like a 90-degree angle, skyrocketed straight back up. And she says to me, just matter of factly, perfect, pretty much a perfect stranger. She says, "You realize that's what put you in this hospital bed in the first place." And that was the epiphany moment that I needed to hear, because my close friends, my family, they all had told me that I was burning myself out. But I kept on saying, yeah, 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 in one ear, out the other. But here's somebody who had no reason to, no skin in the game to tell me that what I was doing to myself. And so I just thought, wow, this is crazy. I'm trading my health for my career. And that's a very bad trade. So I really thought about what I was doing and spent most of the rest of the day just contemplating that. And I got out of the hospital 2 days after that. And I decided the day after I got out of the hospital, I resigned. And for the first time in my life, I had actually decided to focus on myself, my health. And what's interesting is that as I started to experiment with different stress relief tools and techniques, not only did my stress go down, my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my energy level went way, way up. It was as if I had discovered the fountain of youth. And here's the crazy thing, David. If you saw a picture of me back in 2008 when I was first diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes, and you see a picture of me now, other than a little bit more gray hair, I actually look younger than I did in 2008. That's what stress does to us. It
Yeah,
ages us rapidly. It's nuts. And so my friends, my family, my former coworkers, they all said, "Oh, you ought to write a book about this." And so I said, "Sure, I'll write a book about it." And then my goal now is just to, make sure that everybody realizes that it doesn't take an enormous amount of time to help get a little bit more stress relief in our daily lives. Just have to spend a few minutes with a technique or two that work for us. And if you use it regularly on a daily basis, the compound benefits will be enormous as long as you use them regularly. You just got to make it a habit.
yeah, and I totally understand because stress is mostly, the main denominator of people being ill, as well as obviously major problems like heart attacks. And
Yes.
you said diabetes, that is a factor that can contribute. But, stress, wherever you are, it's always, not saying it's physically there all the time, but it's always lurking, want to poke you and make you go to that limit. And I've been there myself several times. I was explaining before we started recording, I've got eczema.
Mhm.
But my eczema was from since I was a baby. It now flares up when I'm extremely stressed. It's up at
Mhm.
the moment because at the moment I'm in between jobs from my old job to where I'm potentially looking for a job now. So my eczema is at level. It's balanced. It's flared up. I know I want to itch it, and I've got medication, herbal medication to help me with it. I got yeah, a thing called it's called eczema pill, but
Mhm.
it's not. It helps me keep that edge off, but at the same time, my mind I can't take tablets for because if you
Mhm.
take normal tablets for depression or anxiety, your body gets used to it. So I'm doing it the natural way.
Yes, it's true. And that the problem that what often happens is, the pharmaceutical industry has taught us that, oh, the easiest thing is just take a pill, but what ends up happening is our bodies are so smart that they adapt. So when we put a chemical into our bodies, such as a pharmaceutical drug, if we use it regularly, of course, our bodies are going to adjust to it because that's what our bodies do. Our bodies are enormously smart. And when mentioning about this, stress causing so many different issues is very true because technically, if a doctor was to say, well, stress doesn't directly cause whatever it is, diabetes, heart disease, eczema, whatever it is. But what ends up happening is stress causes cellular inflammation in our bodies. And that cellular inflammation in our bodies is what causes other issues. And so, but if I was to say to someone, "Oh, well, your stress is causing you cellular inflammation," it
They were like,
doesn't.
what?
They don't get what it doesn't mean anything to them. But if I say, stress will, continuous stress where you're continuously pounding yourself over and over and over again, that will lead at some point to some sort of chronic disease. And the sad part is that we can avoid it. We can minimize that. But unfortunately, what I did and what so many other people I know of, what they end up doing is they keep on putting it off, putting it off, putting it off, taking care of themselves. And if we think about whenever we're on an airplane, the flight attendant will say, in the unlikely event of the loss in cabin pressure, what does the person say? They say, put the mask on yourself before putting it on a
Others.
child or
Yeah.
others, or like
But
I had
mainly child because that's what they base it on.
exactly mostly, but I did have one flight attendant who actually was quite witty. She said, "Put the mask on yourself before putting it on a child." And then she pauses and she says, "Or someone acting like a child." And then she says, "If you're traveling with more than one child, put the mask on the child with the most potential first."
Okay, that child's got a degree coming, neighbor. That child let's still get an G. I get it. I do see that.
And of course my daughter, she's she's the just an amazing amazing academic background, and she's a nurse practitioner. But when she was small and I mentioned that to her from my flight, she looked at me, and because she has she has her brother, and she says, "Well, that means that you would put the mask on me first, right?"
It's true though, but going back to the pharmaceutical aspect, I had depression and anxiety from early age. They labeled it because, as you gathered, I'm not from America. I'm from England originally, but I am in
Hmm.
America now.
Hmm.
But I was 15 and I was going through life changes because obviously I was becoming a young man, 16. I was in England, you leave in school at 16. So it was that jump from the stability of school to college stroke university. In my case, it was college.
Hmm.
They put me on antidepressants.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not promoting any names in any specific way because, and this is not endorsed pharmaceutical podcast, but they put me on an antidepressant. They put me on the strongest dose of that antidepressant from the get-go.
Hmm.
It did not work. They put me on another antidepressant. It was twice as strong. Still didn't work. They put me on a third. So by the age of 17, I was on the third type of medication, even though I had 2 years previous of other medication. That still didn't work. They finally found a medication for me. It made me feel like I was putting on weight because they said this is good for you and it adds some benefit use because but the side effect of it all apart from the weight was that I was not myself. I was like a zombie walking through everything. I was like, everything was easy. I couldn't think it was me.
Hmm.
And they said, you're getting better. Your stress and anxiety is going. I'm like, no. And it took I'm 41 in a couple of weeks, but it took till I was literally leaving England to say, look, I don't need antidepressants. So now I'm antidepressant free, but the factor is I still have anxiety, but
Hmm.
I'm doing things to help me, which is taking natural medication. Like I said, I'm not promoting the medication I've got now, except what's called
Hmm.
eczema pill, but that helps me. I do have
Hmm.
creams if I need it,
Hmm.
but I know deep in myself it's not a complete cure because I'm still got that hidden stress.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and there's the reality is when we are faced with something that's extremely challenging, it's very difficult to try and say, okay, what can I do to alleviate some of this stress? What I find in the research that I did for my book, I actually found that not all stress is bad.
No,
So like if we're working on something that we're excited about, we're passionate about, whatever it happens to be, the stress that we face, let's say to get something done, that actually is good stress. It's the term is called eustress, eustress. And that's the kind of stress that we need to get something done on time. Like, let's say we have this project with this thing that we're very excited about. We need a deliverable. We got to get that deliverable by a certain day or a certain time. That kind of stress is not bad. What ends up happening is that there's actually two flavors of stress that I found were the ones that we really, really need to focus on to try and minimize, if not eliminate. One is ruminating about something in the past. So this typically is something, very often associated with guilt. We're either have guilt about something we either did or didn't do in the past. And the reality is it's in the past and we can't change the past.
Yeah.
We can take the positive learnings from it. And then if we can forgive ourselves instead of letting that guilt churn inside of us, that helps us move forward. So that's one. And then the other one, what you mentioned about anxiety, that is something that may, have an anxiety over something that may or may not happen in the future. And unfortunately, when we start getting anxious about something, our human nature often is to focus on it going terribly wrong.
And
And
that's all
so
your mindset is constantly.
exactly, exactly. So, a great example is, let's say we have to have a difficult conversation with someone, either someone at work, someone, a family member, whoever it is. And we sit there and we're going through our minds, oh, how is this gonna, what's this gonna go? And we're thinking it's gonna go terribly, it's gonna blow up, whatever. And as you said, we often manifest that negative outcome. But instead, what I suggest to people is, if it's something like that, think about 5 seconds. If you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, think about 5 seconds, or visualize 5 seconds after the last word in that conversation has been said. And you visualize the other person smiling. Maybe they're shaking your hand. Maybe you're giving them a hug. Whatever it happens to be, that would be a positive. And if you can visualize that instead of visualizing a negative outcome, what you'll notice is that the stress will actually come down and often will manifest that positive outcome, because that's the energy we're sending out to the universe
Yeah.
for that particular situation. So it's something that's good if we have the mindset for, but it's not an all encompassing thing, because there are certain situations where we just have to deal with them in the moment.
Mm.
And it's just a matter of, when we have a little bit of time, and instead of letting our minds just continue to churn inside of us and have that toxicity inside of us, if we can do something to try and remove some of that and be able to minimize some of that anxiety and some of that ruminating about the past, all other stress will actually be a piece of cake. It really
Mm.
will be.
So another example I can give, I know, you got stress at work, for example.
Mhm.
You're in a place where you can't willingly just escape from it.
Mhm.
Now, the ideal place is, yeah, escape if you can. That is the easy, quick way. But if you can't immediately do it, the strategy I always say is take 5 minutes out from that schedule. If you're in a place where you can't get out straight away, take that 5 minutes every hour just to take time for yourself. And
Yes,
and even if you are, example, if you're in a place where you have clients, you take that 5 minutes because that client will appreciate you more for taking that 5 minutes out than you sitting there and getting boiled up.
absolutely. It's a micro break. That's basically what we're recommending. And I mentioned to people who, let's say, that are very, very busy, and they've got their calendar completely full. Well, what you do is you put a 5-minute break in your calendar every hour, and you just and you take that 5 minutes and you treat that 5 minutes just like it would be an appointment with somebody important, because that person that's important is yourself. And the reality is, if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you. And one thing that I always try and remind people, they'll say, oh, well, I'll take care of my health when I get to it. Well, The reality is when we don't have our health. So if we imagine the last time that we were really, really sick, let's say with a flu, if you're honest, did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed? Probably not. And if all you can do is lie in bed, you're no good to your career. You're no good to your business. You're no good to your loved ones. You just because you have no energy other than to lie in bed. Your health is so paramount. To me, what I've learned and what I find is that our two greatest assets are our health and time. We shouldn't be wasting those two.
No, because every second is precious, as I look at it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and also, I learned in my own self. I don't know if you heard of this mindset about the positive mental attitude. You got to have
Mhm.
the positive mental thinking to have the right attitude to progress in yourself.
Yes, and the easiest way to do that is to just do a gratitude exercise on a daily basis. In fact, what my wife and I do at the end of our day before we go to bed, either she asks me or I ask her. We ask each other, what are we grateful for today? And so that gives us a recap of what happened during the day. And so, for example, when she asks me, I always start with, I'm grateful for my health because all else is secondary. And that's because I basically almost lost, my health to this battle with stress.
Hmm.
And another thing that, I can tell you I'll be saying as a part of my gratitude for tonight will be our conversation today. It was a highlight for me. So, what it does is by having a gratitude exercise on a daily basis, it gives you the opportunity to recap what was good about your day. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I just got a raise at work, or oh, I just won the lottery or something like that. Sure, be grateful for that kind of stuff, but it's not intended to be something that is necessarily big. It's to take account of some of the small things that we should be grateful for.
And that's
And
and that's what makes a journey unique in everyone because
yes.
everyone's journey is unique. Everyone's journey is different than the previous journey. So your journey, talking about stress, how to deal with it, is different than the previous guest, for example. But
Mhm.
the common denominator is thank you for that, thank you for this, I'm grateful for this.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And what I'll do too is, let's say I'm in my car, and if I get a green light, I'll say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's just an automatic thing that I do because I'm sending out to the universe that I like that. Give me more, you know. And so, because I have had several people who said, well, that doesn't work. And I said, well, have you ever been running late for an appointment and you start stressing and getting mad at every red light? Do you notice that you get more red lights? And
Yeah,
so, it happens. Um, so I just try and stay positive with that. And the gratitude also extends. It's interesting. I read a book several years ago called The Happiness Equation. And the author, Neil Paschuka, I think, or Paschika or something like that, he uh, he said that there was an interesting take that he took for a couple things. One, let's say if you wake up in the morning and you're going, ugh, I don't want to get out of bed because I just don't want to face work. Well, so he says in his book that in the whole history of the earth, and this is 10 years ago, so he was saying there's been roughly 115 billion people, probably 117 billion now, or 118 billion. But he basically says that of the whole history of the earth, there are 115 billion people who've ever lived. And today there's 7 billion people alive. That means 14 out of 15 people who've ever lived on earth are dead. The fact that we woke up in the morning means that we won the lottery, and we should be grateful for that. So that's one thing he talked about. And another one that resonated with me, and another one that resonates with me is something that's often with a lot of people where finances, they stress about their finances. And he says, well, the uh, the average income earner in the world, not just in the US, but in the world, the average income earner makes $5,000 per year, meaning that if you make $5,001 per year, you're in the top 50% of the world's income earners. And if you make $50,000 and $50,001 per year, you're in the top 95% of the world's income earners. So instead of thinking, oh, taking coming from a sense of lack of finances, think about how much better you're actually doing than a huge part of the world's population.
Mm.
So it's all in your perspective. Again, going
Yeah,
back to mindset.
yeah. So we was discussing obviously about going through coping mechanisms, and you was going to give a short example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can we just do that and then we?
Sure. Yeah, so you were mentioning about being stressed out at work or something. So let's say you something has happened at work, or let's say maybe you're in sales and you pulled up in front of a building of a prospect and you're really nervous about going in and making a sales call, or maybe you have to make a difficult phone call or something like that. So a great technique it extends more on this visualization I talked about earlier. So what you do, and it only takes a minute. So what you do is close your eyes. So go ahead and close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And I want you to go in your mind to a place you like to relax. Call it your happy place. Maybe it's the beach, maybe it's a park, maybe it's a lake, maybe it's your backyard, maybe it's a spa, maybe it's your favorite chair in your home. Whatever it is, go there now and take in all of your senses. So, what do you feel? Do you feel the sun on your face? Maybe the sand or the grass under your feet? And what do you hear? Do you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Maybe the water splashing on shore? And what do you smell? Do you smell the fresh air? Maybe the lotion from the spa? Maybe you made popcorn for your favorite movie. And what do you see? Do you see the blue sky? Maybe the green of the trees or the grass? Whatever it is, take it all in and take another deep breath in. And you open your eyes. Simple grounding exercise. And the reason you engage your senses with it is because it tells your body to calm down.
Mm.
So it's a very simple exercise. You can do it anywhere other than if you're driving a vehicle. Not a good idea because you don't want to close your eyes while you're driving that vehicle.
So yeah, advisory: do not use this coping skill when driving.
Yes, exactly. So if you want to do this one, press pause first before.
And you can go back again if you want to do it again and again. That's what I like about that.
Absolutely. And again, it takes a minute or less. And it's just, you can do that. I've had people who do that where, they say, well, I have a cubicle at work. I don't have privacy. Well, that's perfectly fine. You can go step outside. You could go to the restroom and close the stall door and do it there. Wherever you got, so you can just have 1 minute of time on your own. It works really, really well. And it's just a matter of being able to be aware of it. And that's the thing that's really interesting about these techniques. When I first started looking at different ideas to help reduce my stress, I looked at these various books, and that they're 200 to 300 page books on one activity like meditation or yoga or deep breathing. And I thought to myself, well, the reality is most of us busy people have 5 minutes or less before we have to go into our next stressful situation. We need to try something very quickly. And the reality is, too, that like something that might work for me, David, may not work for you, and vice versa. So you have to try different ideas. And once you find an idea or two that works for you, you run with it because now you found something that is specific to you and you just go ahead and you use it. And like I said earlier, if you get into the habit of using it on a daily basis, the compound benefits are enormous, but you have to do it regularly.
Yeah. So moving to the future and obviously how you see things, do you see people actually moving towards like helping themselves with the way you teach, or do you think people are learning in their own way with your guidance?
I think each person, everyone is unique. So what I found is that people take what works for them and they apply it to their own situation. And that's the way that we should we should approach it. So, like uh, going to that visualization exercise. Maybe it's, I mentioned the beach, the park, a lake, etc. Maybe those aren't the places that, a person may find relaxing. It could be something else. So
Mm.
you just modify it the way that you need. And so I think you take, I've always this is the way I've always taught my students as well, is you take what works for you and you let go of the rest. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it a very specific way. Some people, need to follow an exact path. Absolutely. So whatever works for you, that's the way that
And
it should be
and
approached.
And usually following those set paths are usually recommended by professionals, or if you get
Right.
apps for your phone. But I notice most apps do come with that sort of technique in it. It does help you, but at the same time, that is guided. It's not actually a routine for yourself. It's something that's told to you. So if you
Right.
do listen to something, yes, it is good long term for some, but at the same time, you got to take time, like you said, for yourself, not listening to anything on the phone. Yes, at night I listen to restless music, which it helps because for the first half an hour when I put it on the display, it's a display of calm, it's serenity. After half an hour, that screen goes to black and it stays black for example 11 hours, and it doesn't bother me. It keeps me in that zone to keep focused and to feel less stress, to feel less anxiety. If I'm feeling sore, it will help me feel some sort of relief to say I'm in a calm, collected place.
Absolutely. And it's true. I mean, one of the things that I always recommend to people as well is, we are so reliant on our phones, but it's really beneficial to detox from the technology when we get a chance. It really is, because when we are so asphyxiated with our phones, it takes away from us being present with what's going on around us. And so with those apps that allow you to do the guided meditation, yeah, they're great. But how about just taking a walk and just enjoying, even if it's around the block of a building, just enjoy what you see. pay attention and get used to detoxing that. You know what? It's okay if you for 5 minutes you're not checking your phone. That, it doesn't what amazes me now, one positive of the whole COVID thing was for me was it gave me a new appreciation for restaurants, because I used to take restaurants for granted. And when COVID hit, we couldn't go to restaurants. And so when the restaurant getting to be able to go back to restaurants was reopened, I was so excited. And I still don't take it for granted anymore. I really like to enjoy it. But I can't help but notice where there'll be two people, three people, four people, whatever it is, sitting at a table in the same restaurant, and every one of them is asphyxiated to their phones. They're not communicating with each other. They're not taking in anything that's going on around them. And I think to myself, why did you bother sitting down at the table here? Why didn't you just get takeout? Because you're not getting any of of the benefits of being in a restaurant. And the other thing too is when we prioritize our phone, let's say we go out to lunch or dinner with somebody, a friend, a family member, somebody important, a coworker, whoever it is, and we're sitting there on our phone, we're prioritizing our phone. What does that say to the other person on the other side of the table? It says that whatever's on my phone is more important than you. And so, what I always suggest is, you know what? Ask the other person and do it yourself. Turn off your phone for that meal.
Yeah,
It's amazing how good the conversation will be when you're not sitting there being distracted at every moment with the phone.
yeah, and that is the problem with phones nowadays, as well as tablets. But mainly phones have been got portable is because you've got
Mhm.
constant notifications, bing, bing,
Yes,
bing.
yes, exactly. And here's the thing too, is that let's say, that the average vacation is like a week long. And the clinical research shows that when we go on a vacation, humans go on a vacation, uh, it takes us, working adults, takes us 3 days to unwind from work, and we start ramping back up for work 3 days before the start of work. So let's say we take 7 days. Well, basically Wednesday is going to be our vacation day because the first 3 days are unwinding from work. The last 3 days, we're starting to think about work again and winding back up. But when we are checking our messages on our vacation, even if we're only doing it once or twice a day, we're never disconnecting from work, and we never actually do take a vacation because we're still engaged mentally with work, and we don't give our brains that time to decompress. So it's really important, at the end of the day, not checking your messages constantly, um, you know, or on the weekend, and again on vacation. If you can just just put the autoresponder saying, hey, I'm on vacation. I'll get back to you with this when I get back into the office. And what I do this, and what's interesting is that, sure, I might get in 1 week's time, I'll get a couple hundred emails. But what's interesting is that of those 200 emails, 180 of them will have resolved themselves because they if they somebody needs help right away, they're going to get, if you say the autoresponder, they're going to, and you say who they can contact, go ahead, they'll reach out to that person. And so it's really a wonderful thing to be able to, and I would do this every time when I go on vacation, the day before I come back, and usually the evening before, I'll go through and I'll wipe out all the emails that don't are not relevant anymore. And so then I have my 10, let's say, that are ones that I need to respond to during the day on the next day, and that's fine. But if you can avoid checking daily, because I know that it's like, oh, well, then they won't pile up. Well, the reality is if it's an emergency and you've given an autoresponder, somebody else will take care of it. Somebody else will help them.
Yeah,
So, and people appreciate that you are taking time for yourself. A lot of people who are out of balance don't. And the last thing you want to do is burn out. Because trust me, I speak from specific experience, prioritizing everything else over myself. And it's just not worth it.
yeah. So to end, I noticed in your background you got your website showing.
Mhm.
Is that the best place where people can find out more, obviously, and get in contact with you?
Yeah, yeah, because that's got a link to my book. It's got a link to, I have an online course. I've got, a YouTube channel that has a lot of activities that you can try for yourself. So those are the kind of places, then people can reach out and connect with me on social media as well.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to tell the listeners, viewers before?
Yeah, yeah, I would just say the one thing that I would re-emphasize over and over again, please, 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 don't trade your health for your career. It's a very bad trade.
Pete, it has been amazing listening to your journey today, and I hope this helps people who need that reassurance, that extra push to say, I need that help.
Yeah, and David, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I greatly appreciate the listeners' time as well.
Thank you.